This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Welcome back to Basket Case Clubs, and you'll recognise that this voice is different because this is not Michael hosting today, but it's Steve, because we've kicked Michael out of this topic, and with me here today is, from our team, Matt McEwen. G'day, Matt.
G'day, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You have joined us for a podcast before, haven't you? I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Was it all three of us?
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah, that was a few years ago.
It was. It's been too long between drinks.
It has been. I've been waiting for the invite back. Thought I'd done something wrong in the first one. Or I had done it so perfectly that you didn't need me back.
Never needed you again. Yep. Well, yes. Well, let's take a little from column A and a little from column B. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to get you involved today, Matt, aka Macca. So in this episode, you're all going to hear me refer to Matt interchangeably as Matt and Macca. It's because it's Matt McEwen. I've got a theory that every group of humans has a Macca that they know. So Macca is our Macca. And Macca has some experience working in the not-for-profit sector before, quite a lot of experience working in the not-for-profit sector before joining CPR Group. But part of that experience was as a general manager at a football club. I'm going to use the word football because there's so many codes in Australia that no one's going to know which of the many codes we're talking about. And you were GM.
Yep, general manager, yeah.
And it was a club that probably wasn't ready for a GM.
Not in the way that the role was used for me. I think they definitely needed staff members.
Yep.
Members, I say that as plural as well. There was me and a few other people on a casual basis. So it was a pretty decent club with good turnover and quite a lot to do. Mm-hmm. So they definitely, when I say definitely, it was a good idea to have paid staff at that club.
But they weren't tooled up to do it right.
Not at that stage, no, I don't think so.
Yep.
And I think that was a big issue. And something that I see very frequently with the clubs I work with, with CPR Group, that they've identified a need for staff because the volunteer burden keeps getting bigger and bigger and they can't deal with it.
Yep.
I've actually come across one club in my time that has said, we want one but not yet. And they've actually taken the time to, and I think which club I'm talking about, because they don't want to make the mistake that a lot of clubs do, and they just go, all right, we're going to pay a full-time staff member. Yep. We're going to get them to do everything, and all our problems will be solved. Yeah. And if anything, it actually creates more problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So the topic today that we're going to be tackling is people management, and this is part of our work with the City of Moreton Bay in our training and education series. And we tackled the topic of governance a few weeks ago, and this episode is dedicated to the people management session that we facilitated with the City of Moreton Bay a couple of weeks ago now, or last week. And the reason that I thought it would be great to involve you, Macca, is because you have been talking for some time based on your personal experience of that job that we just talked about, but also the work that you now do here at CPR Group with clubs and societies, associations, all sorts of not-for-profit groups that are battling this sort of ever-growing challenge of getting and keeping people to deliver their services. And I wanted to tap into some of your personal insights and ideas and some of the discussions and tips and tricks that you provide in your work with clubs and organisations to try and not only improve their capability in terms of managing people, but also considering this step towards paying people and delivering their work their services rather in a more sort of professionalised way. And we've talked for many, many years, and certainly listeners of our podcast know that we talk about this idea of if you're going to pay people, make sure you do it right.
Yeah,
don't try and cut corners and pay people a bit of cash under the table, because it will end up coming back to bite you in the backside. I thought that would be a really good one to loop you in on. Obviously, we've had that really good session. We got some good questions that were thrown to us at the end of that online session with people from within the not-for-profit landscape in the City of Moreton Bay. But as is always the case, I'm sure that our discussion will meander outside of those experiences of people just in the City of Moreton Bay.
Now, Steve, you were saying there that it was a good idea to loop me in because of my experience, but also I was just standing there in the hallway when you needed to start recording. So you pulled me in, and here I am.
And therein lies some backstage secrets of basket case clubs. And if you were in our hallway as our listeners, you may well be pulled into a future episode of Basket Case Clubs.
Just walking past.
The podcast of convenience, we call it, yes. So let's firstly start maybe with this sort of challenge that we know exists across the country in terms of the decline in volunteerism. And we talk a bit about the statistics and statistics tell part of the story, and we know that in 2016, about 19% of Australians of working age provided regular voluntary assistance with an organisation or group, and by 2021 that number had dropped to 14%. And we know that also COVID was a disruption, and in 2021 we were more disconnected from our communities and our organisations than ever before, but it ain't going back to 19%. And the reason that we know that confidently is because in the early to mid thousands that number was more like a third of Australians. So in your work across the not-for-profit sector, how are you seeing this manifest, this sort of decreasing or declining willingness of people to stick up their hands as volunteers, and what sort of impact is it having on not-for-profits?
I think a lot of the time and when we deliver workshops and do different things with clubs and associations and not-for-profits out there, it always looks very scary to be a volunteer. And I think that's one of the bigger issues, because the harder it gets and the harder it looks, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So one of the things that we talk about, if someone new to your organisation is at a club or association function and they see the president running around flustered and stressed and doing everything, the first thing people will think, well, that's what volunteering at this place looks like.
And I don't want to be the president.
So I'm definitely not going to put my hand up. And At the next AGM, I'll be keeping my eyes firmly to the floor and won't look up and make eye contact in case I get nominated. And I believe that, it's sort of manifesting that way, in that things get harder and harder, and therefore less people are likely to help out. And then it's even harder and harder to get volunteers. So I think the fear of volunteering is quite real in that area, in terms of people seeing that and just thinking, I don't want to volunteer here. It looks really, really difficult. Conversely, we try to educate our people at our workshops to say, if you can make it a little bit more accessible, and we'll talk about that, make it more accessible to people, so that if you are new at an organisation and volunteering isn't scary, because it's not going to be, you're the new president and you're going to do everything. We're actually just going to ask you to do a few pretty easy things, dip your feet in the water and see how you like it, and hopefully they really enjoy it and get satisfaction out of it. Because you can't expect someone who's new to either volunteering or to your organisation to put their hand up and be willing to take on that responsibility. And it can be very daunting when you talk about the big roles like president, secretary and treasurer. You know from experience that that's a lot of work. And we're talking tens and tens of hours a week, which is almost like a full-time job in itself.
And one of the big problems is that, exactly as you just mentioned, it's often not the case that the president nor the treasurer nor the secretary gets to just do the stuff that's on their job description if they've got one. It's all the other shit that they get called in to do, and they're at the club, they're serving people in the canteen, they're marking the lines, or they're squeegeeing the courts, and they're doing, all of the operational stuff as well as the governance related stuff. And that exacerbates that challenge of these already busy people appearing to be, in a position that no one else is ever going to want to take on.
And can also say, when you talked about people who they're there squeegeeing the court or whatever it might be, I think another issue that some not-for-profits face is that the people in those roles are very important and they do some great stuff, but a lot of the times they're not great at delegating and letting go. So I have to do it because I'm the one that knows how to get the squeegee out of the storage container, and I'm the only one who knows how to use it. That's not sustainable, and it definitely shouldn't be something that the president's saying. But again, I think that happens quite a lot, where it's almost like they, and I don't want to be too harsh here, but convincing themselves that I'm the best person to do that. You might be, but one of the messages we put out there is that even if you find someone who's not the best person to do it, it's at least another person that's not you.
Yeah.
If you're the best person at doing 100 things as president, that's probably true, because you've been doing it for 20 years and no one else has been let in yet to actually learn that skill. Again, that self-fulfilling prophecy, around and around we go.
Yeah.
And no one's ever actually given an opportunity to in the first instance, probably fail and not be very good at it and maybe drop the ball. But that's the only way you're going to learn a new skill. And I think that happens quite frequently with the not-for-profit areas, where it is those a handful of people who have been there for a long time, who hold on to a lot of things.
Yep.
And the sooner they let go of that, the more people can actually come. And like I said, they might fail in the first instance, but at least they're given it a chance to have a crack.
And I've got this saying that I've stolen from an author, which is 80% of something being done by someone else is 100% awesome. And even though they might not do it exactly as well as you, or they might not be as capable straight away, if you're able to delegate or divest some of those more menial operational tasks to others in your organisation, if you're in one of those key positions particularly, it frees you up to be doing the more strategically important stuff.
It's like my mother in the kitchen with me. She can't be there because she can't help herself. Because I'm not doing it the way that she would. And she's are you going to turn it? Yes. And she gets kicked out of the kitchen. And it's the same concept, right? The president shouldn't be sniffing around while that person's learning how to squeegee.
Absolutely.
Let them have a crack at it and let's see how they go.
Yep. And again, if they're able to do it, even if they don't get it exactly right the first time, they get a bit of support and mentoring, they'll be freeing you up to be doing the more strategic, important stuff.
And I think there might be a little bit of catastrophe or catastrophizing in those people's heads that if I don't do it or someone new does it, it could be an absolute disaster and they're going to stuff it up and there'll be...
And that might have happened in the past.
And I'll have to go in there and fix it up anyway, so I might as well bloody do it myself, do it well and do it the right way first. And I think that happens a bit too. And
for some people, and we certainly experience this, volunteering can become a really integral part of their identity. And it might be, the one thing that they've got in their life in which they feel like they're contributing real value and they've got some, degree of authority or power, for want of a better term. And that can even be a subconscious or subliminal thing that people struggle to give up. Because, at home, if they're anything like me, they do as they're told. And at work, if they're anything like me, they do as they're told. But, in their volunteer role, they've got that degree of autonomy and authority to do their job well. And it can be really hard for them to give that up to someone else who might not do it as well as them the first time. Yeah. And I want to quickly come back to something that you mentioned earlier, which is this idea of, and we covered this in this session, which was touching on the principles of influence in getting new helpers. So one of them is sort of social proof. So you mentioned at one end of the spectrum, we see volunteer committee members running around like headless chickens, way too busy, too much to do, not enough time to get it all done. And that's a real disincentive to other people sticking up their hand. At the other end of the spectrum, we talk about social proof being a real motivator for some people to stick up their hand and volunteer if they see other people doing it and having a good time. So if an organisation does a really good job of promoting the activities that volunteers in their organisation do, and people can genuinely see that others who are volunteering are having a good time, are better connected with other people in their organisation or with the community, then for some people that can be the social proof that they need to stick up their hand and volunteer themselves. And as humans, we're incredibly susceptible to external influence, and we talk about the diffusion of responsibility or bystander effect. This two conflicting rules of human nature that mean that when the fire alarm goes off in a shopping centre, people just keep shopping. And the reason is that everyone else around them keeps shopping, which is this cyclical thing that means that everyone just keeps shopping. So
everyone looks around, sees what everyone else is doing, and then goes back to what.
Yeah. And if I've got this theory, I've never been in a shopping centre when this happens, but I've got this theory that if someone panicked and just started running for the door, that other people would follow, because then it would become normal to do that. So in a similar way, if people in your organisation see others volunteering and they're not run off their feet and they don't look overburdened and it actually looks like a bit of fun, then that social proof can be all that it takes for people to stick up their hand and offer some support as well. The other thing that you said is, not dumping a big task on someone's lap in the first instance, but just giving them some micro tasks to do and to demonstrate that, if you help out, you're not going to be asked to take on more and more and more, and we will take what help you can offer. And the idea of micro tasks is something else that, we talk a bit about, is just getting people to just, get their foot in the door and try doing something. And like I say, if they see that it's actually a bit of fun and they get some perks, and ideally they're intrinsic perks and intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic when it comes to rewards and recognition, which we'll talk about as well in a moment. But I think it's really important that organisations recognise the value of making it really easy for people to take on a role, and that means clearly identifying what help you need, articulating what a position looks like. And we talk a bit about the basketball club, that one of the basketball clubs based here on the Sunshine Coast, that several years ago we were working with them, and there were 7 people on the committee, and they were getting burnt out, and they had each far too much to do. So they sat down one night and they wrote out a list of 38 jobs. Mm-hmm. And amongst those were committee positions like president, secretary, treasurer, vice president, and so on. But then also on that list were things like the person who would open up the stadium on a Friday afternoon, and the person who would close the stadium after basketball on a Friday night. And when people would come in and see the whiteboards lining the reception area, and they'd ask the person, taking the money, taking payments for the night, what are these pieces of paper up on the whiteboards? And they'd say, well, all of those pieces of paper represent a job, and if there's a job there with a title that doesn't have a highlighter through it, it's up for grabs and you can take it. And they went from 7 people doing 38 jobs to 38 people doing 38 jobs in about a month. But until they'd actually clearly documented and articulated to their people what help they needed, and they just said, we need volunteers, we need help, we need you, until they clarified exactly what they meant by that, no one was sticking up their hands.
So on that, I always talk about the Uncle Sam posters back in the war of recruiting for the war effort, and it's Uncle Sam with a big finger saying, we want you. Yeah. And that's it. And I think about a lot of not-for-profits, that's how they look for volunteers. Yeah. We're desperate, we need people, we need volunteers.
We don't know what we need you to do.
It's so open and vague that it's very easy to ignore. Yeah, and it is. One of the examples that I've provided in some of our workshops is a advertisement for a photographer, and it might not even, your organisation might not need a photographer, but it's a good example. And the advertisement clearly states what the role is, what you need. You need an SLR, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but you need a professional style camera.
I think it is.
You need to commit X amount of hours, and it will be on these days, and this is what you'll get. And I always talk about that pledge that the organisation makes to its volunteers. Like you said, if you take this role up, you're not going to end up opening the stadium. You will be our photographer, and we will be very clear. And yes, there might be some incidental things that we ask you to come and help with that we didn't know about. Yep. But for the most part, you won't get pulled in to do, because, we've got another one on the hook. And now, all right, guess what? Surprise, you're not a photographer anymore. We need you to put out the bins and clean the toilets and do all this other stuff. And I think if you're going to your point about being honest and open with your volunteers that this is what we need and this is what we'll ask you to do, and we will pledge that we won't, to a point, but we won't ask you to do anything else. And someone can go in there with the sense of security that, it's going to be Tuesday nights 4 till 6, and your point around opening the stadium, that's all we need you to do. Yep. And you're going to be the best stadium opener in the country, because you'll be able to commit all your time to it. And then once you've opened the stadium, you get to go and watch your kids play basketball or whatever it might be that you're there for. Yep. And your job is done. So I think that's really important to be very specific. I always use the example as a business CPR group. We don't go stand out the front of this office and yell out, who wants a job? And then just hope someone shows up and says, great. And fingers crossed it's exactly who we're looking for, because that's not going to happen. Yeah. We also don't expect people to just walk through the door. Sometimes they do and look a bit lost because they found the wrong office, but we don't expect people to just show up and say, hey, I was just looking for XYZ job and go, oh, well, what are the odds of that? That's exactly what we were hoping for. And what are your skills and experience? But I think too many not-for-profits approach volunteer recruitment in that sense is that they just hope for the best and aren't very specific. So until you actually know what types of volunteers you're looking for, what skills they have, what experience they have, what availability they have, how new they are to your organisation, get really, really clear so that when you know what you're looking for, not only can you then be very clear on, like you said, the post-it notes on the whiteboard, but also if you go, you know what, I was talking to Steve the other day, he's a new member, and he was mentioning that he's just got into bird watching and he's got himself a new camera and he's been taking these great photos, but he hasn't got anything else to use his camera for, and he's looking for an opportunity. So I'm going to go next time I see Steve, I'll go have a chat to him and see if he wants to be our photographer.
Yep.
So again, you know exactly what you're looking for.
And what you've just touched on in that example, I think, is really important for organisations to recognise. So the president who's running around with far too much to do is not able to have conversations with members to learn that they're interested in bird watching and have a camera that they could use for the job that we need filled.
Yep.
So strategically, the key governance roles in an organisation should be filled by people who are good people and who recognise that a really significant part of their job is to establish and foster positive relationships with their members, with their customers, with their stakeholders. It's not just to be busy doing the busy work of today. But that's a real trap to fall into, because if I'm busy, I feel like I'm contributing value, and you know, if no one else can do it, then even more so. But the organisations that do the best job of delivering their services and delivering them well for the long term are those that recognise that they need to be systems-based, process-based organisations rather than people-based.
Yes, definitely.
Which brings us to the concept of succession planning that I wanted to pick your brain on as well. And I'm a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I focus on the word success that forms part of the word succession. And I did some research with ChatGPT recently to, you know, discern exactly where the word succession comes from. In fact, I can probably pull this up here. So the word succession comes from the Latin successio, meaning a coming after or following on. This is built from the verb succedere. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. But long story short, the word success is not from where the word succession comes. However, I like to focus on it. And if we take out the ION at the end, we can, agree, I think, that a large part of the motivation, as I see it, for organisations doing good succession and not just succession planning. And succession planning is an interesting concept, because if I was to say to you, Macca, you know, what sorts of things would you typically see in a strategic plan? You'd probably come up with the same sorts of responses as many other people. Like, you know, you want to see some goals, you want to see your mission, vision, values, you want to see maybe some action items to help you achieve the goals that you've set. There's pretty clear consensus. Then if I was to say what's in a business plan, you'd probably say, oh, well, some of that stuff plus maybe some, you know, financial projections and some, you know, some sections that talk about where we're at financially and where we want to get to financially. But if I was to say what's in a succession plan, there's far less consensus, I think, because as I say it, a good succession plan is rarer than a good not-for-profit organisation budget, and we don't see many budgets. So the idea of succession planning is a little bit amorphous and not particularly, I think, well understood in the not-for-profit sector. But when we talk about doing good succession, if we just break that down to simply articulating an organisation that remains successful regardless of who are the people in the key volunteer or committee roles from one year to the next, then that leads us to discuss, all right, well, how can we stay successful? And of course, if we rely only on the people who are involved at any given time, the level of success that we experience is going to vary depending on those people and who they are and the way that they deliver the services that the organisation provides. So I have been talking a lot more recently, and this is because our business has been going through a process of systemisation, and we talked in this session with local groups across the city of Moreton Bay about the idea of creating kind of playbooks, so real easy to follow instruction manuals, although that's probably a little bit of a specific term that implies a greater level of detail than I actually think should be included in these playbooks. But the idea is that through really simple mechanisms, and we dub them the 3 C's, so using a camcorder to capture a video if you're doing the task. Now, if it's a screen-based task, you can use a screen recording tool that every computer that you buy off the shelf today should have built in, or if not, download an app that does so, and talk through yourself doing the task. Because if you talk through the steps in the process, you're going to capture all the little nuance, the nitty-gritty bits and pieces that you'll forget if you only write a checklist, which is the second C. So the next is to come up with a simple list of things that must always be done in doing that particular task. And the third and final C in the 3 C's is cadence. So identifying the frequency that task happens at. Now, it might be something, if you're a sporting organisation, like signing on your members, that happens at the start of every year or early in your season, and then doesn't happen again throughout the year. Or if it's something like a financial management task, it might happen daily or weekly. So this is a really simple way of breaking down the documentation of the way that things are done in your organisation. And I advocate for finding someone who's already doing a good job of a particular task and making them the champion of that task, and documenting it in a way that not only is easy for them to document it, but also in a way that's really accessible and easy for the next person to understand. Because, you know, we've worked with organisations in the past where we've written a procedures manual, and one example in particular from a big rugby club with 1,000 junior members, 2 playing venues, and by the time we finished the procedures manual, it was out of date.
Yep.
Because a lot of the things that we had in there as the way to do things were no longer the way that they did things. So you have to strike the balance. But the idea of handing over a playbook to the next person or people is, I think, a really valuable one in terms of supporting them to hit the ground running and to be able to do a really good job as quickly as possible.
I think a really important part of any sort of systems or any resources that you're going to be using to hand over to people, it's important to understand that people are going to take those things differently as well. So again, in our experience, we'll deal with people who probably haven't written anything down in 20 years, but they're bloody good at their job.
Yeah.
But it's all up here, so that goes with them. But then on the opposite side, you might have people who document everything, and you'll get a new secretary or a new treasurer who's just said, I've spent the last 2 years documenting everything that we do because nothing was written down before I got here. And then there's everything in between. The important thing to consider, I guess, is that I don't want to use lowest common denominator as a derogatory term, but making sure that what you put together isn't so complex and so wordy that it might appeal to 5% of people.
Yep.
And some people will get that and go, how good is this? It's a 100-page manual. I'm going to sink my teeth into it. I'm going to read every single word. I'm not one of those people.
No.
If someone gave me a 100-page manual of a job, I'm not going to read any of that. I'm just going to work it out myself. And what a waste of time.
Or I'll take a different job, thanks.
Yeah. But if someone maybe had different various sort of ways to access those resources, you might still have the 100-page manual, but you also might have, like you said, a checklist, and it's a one-pager. Some people might not be good at sitting down and reading. They prefer a video. Some people might prefer to learn it. Is it kinesthetic learning when you're doing the
I think so.
I'm trying to go back to my teaching days. It obviously didn't sink in. But
the one where you learn by doing starts with K.
Yeah, I think it's kinesthetic. Yeah. And I think that's not so much a difficulty because I don't want to keep putting barriers up, but I think that's just a consideration that just because Steve Connolly would do it this way doesn't mean that the next person's actually going to appreciate it as well. So I think to your point about making sure that it's accessible, not overdoing it, but at least having something so that the majority of people can pick that up. And like you said, there might be a video recording, there might be a checklist, there might be something really simple. And if there does need to be more, that also sits on our cloud-based folders that we've got there for you. But at the very least, we've got something written down that you can just quickly pick it up. And what do they say? It's very easy to make something complex. Making something simple is very difficult. And to keep it real simple, and look, if you only do these 5 things as president, secretary, treasurer, whatever, then at least you'll be successful. And there's a few other things that you can do, but these are the 5 main ones. 5 main ones.
Yeah, and you make a really good point there that it's critical that any processes that you have documented as an organisation are stored centrally. We don't have them on individual people's phones or computers.
Or even, Steve, at organisation name, people think, that's great because we've got, the something club, Steve at. That's only good for Steve.
Yep.
Because unless the next treasurer's name's Steve.
All right, we're recruiting for a new treasurer.
And it has to be Steve.
There's a few prerequisites, one of which is you must be
and
called
it still
Steve.
happens. And I'm blown away sometimes with quite sophisticated clubs that send me an email and it's the person's name at the club's name.
Yeah.
I think you're almost there. At least you're not using personal emails.
Yep.
But please switch to secretary at, president at, and we keep saying the three main ones, but it could be anything. It could be convener at, could be equipment coordinator at, it could be volunteer coordinator at, which is another role that I always advocate as filling almost as soon as possible. And I'm digressing here, but the volunteer coordinator can be the person that simply looks after volunteers, so that then the board or the committee don't necessarily need to worry about that. They could even assign that task to your basketball club with the sticky notes.
Yep.
That could be the volunteer coordinator's role to actually drive that process. Pick the brains of the board members to say, like, what are the things that happen at this club that we can write down? But I'm going to manage it. I'm going to stick it on the whiteboard and I'm going to be the contact people. And that's my job. And it's almost ironic that your key volunteer role is the volunteer coordinator. It's a person so they don't actually do anything except look after volunteers. So, I mean, it's still a big job, but I think that can sometimes be the first point to say we need to actually get someone to look after all these people we're going to get once we've done an amazing recruitment and retention strategy.
And where you've seen that role work well, other than the practical sort of examples that you've just given of coordinating with the committee, finding out what roles we need done, and then setting out and sort of finding people to fill those roles, what are the other key functions that you've seen that person take care of in terms of their responsibilities as a volunteer coordinator?
They're almost like an HR type role, like they're the main contact, and in a way it's a bit of a buffer from the board so that people aren't going to, and it's not that the board are above that type of thing, but like you said, the board ideally are focusing on other things. If you've got that volunteer coordinator, they can deal with the nitty gritty, so scheduling and making sure that people know when they're rostered on to do a certain role, putting together things like those job descriptions and making sure that that's, is it on their socials, is it on their website, is it in their clubhouse? You talked going way back to the start. I always think that how would you like to be treated on the first day of your job? Take job and put volunteer role in. And you could almost do that for everything about volunteering. Do I get a little welcome pack? Do I get a shirt with this isn't the reason that people volunteer, but it doesn't mean it's not important. And I think a lot of things probably get disregarded because, we're all volunteering. We don't have to give people gift vouchers and we don't have to thank them every 5 minutes. You don't have to. And that's not why they volunteered, but it makes it a lot nicer when you're get a little bit of, not credit, but what's the word?
Acknowledging their
acknowledgement, yeah. So I think treating it like a first starter is another good way to approach those new volunteers. And like you said before, it doesn't have to be a huge role. It could be just a small role. But from the very start, they know who to go to. Do I talk to the president? Oh no, we've got a volunteer coordinator. That person will help you. You've got a polo shirt. You'll get a free coffee, once a month if you go up to there. This is where the bathrooms are. This is who to talk to if you've got any issues. This is when you're expected to be here. This is where you park your car. All those sort of things. And all of a sudden you think, wow, I'm really going to be looked after here. And as you said before, you get that good feeling. And I've had a few jobs over the years, and that first day on the job is quite daunting. Doesn't matter how old you are and how experienced you are, you get that funny feeling in your stomach because you're the new guy, you're the new kid, and it feels a little bit funny. But if all of a sudden you've got some really friendly people, another role that we talk about is welcoming officer. And it could be just a really smiley, happy person that just loves talking to people. And if that's their first, whether it's a new member or a new volunteer, if that's their first experience, they go, well, that person was really friendly. I feel really good about this. Versus one of our colleagues here at CPR Group stopped volunteering at a place, not because she was treated poorly, but she realised that she was just not contributing and she was essentially giving up her time for no reason. She had no satisfaction, so she wasn't getting out of it. So I think, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I think the volunteer coordinator can play that role as almost the conduit between the volunteers and the organisation itself, and really be that go-to person to make those volunteers feel special, but not just that, but also keep them on track, as in these are the roles that we need you to do. And lastly, and this is probably the most tricky part, sometimes volunteers are shit at their job and they need to be HR'd out.
Yeah.
Say, look, Steve, thanks very much for your help. We've got another job that we need you to do. Or it might be that, you ask them to no longer volunteer. Now, that's a really difficult conversation to have.
And it's such a different setting from an employment setting.
But exactly. Well, we can't tell people because they're volunteering. Like, you can fire someone, if you're performance manager, then it's quite clear and we don't have to hire you anymore. But if someone volunteers, it's a very tricky conversation. But I absolutely have come across quite a few organisations that probably needed to do that, but they're a little bit, well, we're not going to have that conversation. So we're just going to let that person keep showing up and making all our lives miserable.
And maybe having a negative impact on the organisation. Service delivery, maybe leading other people to withdraw from volunteering efforts or from membership altogether. So you do have to tackle those difficult HR challenges head on and not just hope that they'll go away by themselves by sleeping on
and that's a very easy thing for me to say. It's a very difficult conversation to have. Yeah. So we understand that.
We do, yeah. And look, one of the reasons that it's often really difficult to have those conversations is that the groundwork hasn't been done at the outset. So then comes this idea of really clearly, and this came up in the discussion at the end of this session, having really clear agreements in place and expectations being set between the organisation and its people so that there's no ambiguity there. And codes of conduct and of course all of the good sort of fundamental governance documents that we suggest organisations should have in place to make sure that they're looking after all their people, not only the people in the volunteer roles. So carrying on with that HR vein then, let's just quickly jump over to this idea of paying people. And we make no bones about the fact that we think that more and more not-for-profits are going to continue on this trajectory because the declining nature of volunteerism means that if those organisations that provide really valuable community services and opportunities for social connection and people to participate in sport and other community activities, if those organisations are going to continue to be here, then we're going to have people to do the work. And in some cases, increasingly, we're going to see people in paid roles. So just quickly, from your personal experience as well as your work with clubs, what are some of the key considerations, in your opinion, Macca, when an organisation is looking to take that step and to employ someone for the first time that they really need to be aware of?
I won't, because we're not experts in this type of thing in terms of actually employing people for not-for-profit. Hopefully it goes without saying that making sure that you're doing everything above the, what did you say before, on the books, and there's a word that you use, but making sure that it's the right... If
you're going to pay people, do it right.
Do it right and make sure that you've got them on the right award or wage and you've got everything in that space covered. I'm definitely not an expert in that space, so I'm not going to talk about that. But that has to be number one, that you're going to do it properly, and you're going to pay them, and they're going to have super, they're going to have leave, they're going to do all these things, the HRE stuff that goes with it, industrial laws, all those sort of things, workplace health and safety. So that's a no-brainer in my opinion. So do that right. Let AI guide you and be your friend, and then go to all the government websites to help you. But the two main things that come to mind that must be done properly, in my opinion, for a paid staff, and at this stage we're talking about a pretty high up, we're not talking about someone working behind the canteen, although this does apply, talking more around if you're thinking of putting on a paid administrator, a general manager, an operational manager, head of, whatever it might be. The first thing is being very, very clear on what their role is, but just as importantly, what their role isn't. Because too often I've seen people at organisations, not-for-profit, hire someone and everyone goes, great, we're going to get that person to do all the stuff. Why should I do it when we're paying Billy Bob over there to do it? He can do it. That's a big trap to fall into. And the clearer you can make that to both the board and the employee, but as importantly, the members, to say that if you've got something that falls in this category, that is not Billy Bob's job. Because if we keep distracting that person for whatever money we're paying them, what a waste of our money to be dealing with really minor things that could be dealt with elsewhere. So number one would be to make it very, very clear what this person's being employed to do. And hopefully it's that high-end stuff. It might still be operational in the day-to-day, but there'll be certain things that they don't need to worry about.
And they've
might
got to be
still
clear on that. They've got to be
have
clear
to be
on
clear.
what is
And
their job.
it might be that your role as this paid staff member is to find someone to do that, yes, but not actually do it yourself. When I was in a paid role at a not-for-profit sporting club, the president at the time was very, very good in understanding that, well, mate, if you go and pick up the beer for the weekend, or you go and fill up the gas for the barbecue, is that the best use of your time in the wage that we're paying you? No, it's probably better for us to get that delivered.
Yeah.
And it might cost us $50. But how much did we just pay you to spend 2 hours driving around town picking up grog in the back of your car?
Yep.
So they got that at least.
And what strategic stuff couldn't you do?
Yeah,
when you were
exactly.
doing that running
Yeah,
around?
because the sponsorship that I was supposed to bring in that role would have, a minute of that would have taken care of the beer delivery.
Yeah.
So yeah, number one is absolutely make clear what that role is, but also what it isn't. And the second part, especially when you're dealing with not-for-profit volunteer boards, who does that person report to? And if you say the board, that's still too vague and ambiguous. So you might think, oh, that's pretty clear. It's the board. The board makes decisions and they govern it. If you can have a direct reporting line, because what if the board is 7 people? And what if one of those board members grabs me as I'm walking through the clubhouse and says, oh, hey, I need you to do this. Well, hang on. Jane told me last week the complete opposite. She's on the board as well. So what's going on? Can I get a little bit of clarity from the board on that one?
And even if 7 people give you the same instruction, they're going to give it to you 7 different ways.
So I think that's a really important one. And the ones that I've seen that do that well are the ones that have very good clarity on who that person reports to, how the reporting lines work, and is there a representative of the board? Is the sole person that provides direction to that member? Or are there other ways that they can do it? And conversely, the ones that don't do that well, not only do the board all tell this person what to do, it's members coming in and saying, you need to go and sort this out. And I just saw this, and we work with a lot of golf clubs who have general managers who can't walk through the clubhouse without 3 or 4 people grabbing them and saying, hey, I've got a problem, can you go fix it? And it's so far from what their actual role is. And the good ones say, that's a great one, this is who you need to go talk to, or send it through to our portal online, which is a member query or whatever it might be.
Yep.
The ones that do that really well are the ones that then empower that person. And it always comes back to, what did you employ them to do? And what you're paying them as an organisation, are you getting good value for money? And if they're going off and picking up beer on from the pub and filling up gas bottles, it's probably not the best use of the money that you're spending to employ that person.
Yep. Excellent advice. Yep, I absolutely agree. And that is such a common pitfall in employing someone for the first time that we see organisations fall into. Well, the various pitfalls that you mentioned there, lumping them with everything because it's finally someone in a paid role to do the job, and great, there's this one thing that I do that really frustrates me that I don't want to do anymore, so I'm giving it to them, right through to lack of clarity of reporting lines. And if you've got to have one boss. There must be clarity around who that person is, because anything else is going to lead to frustration and dissatisfaction for that person, because they're not going to feel like they're able to do a good job.
Can I add one last thing? And it's a little bit just in experience from what I've seen, and probably hasn't been overtly told to me, but I see it happen. Most people will volunteer because of whatever the drive that gets them there. But a lot of the time it's that passion. It's either passion for the organisation or the sport or the thing that organisation does. Maybe they were a former member and they're passionate about it, they want to sustain all that. Don't assume that the employee is going to have that same passion. It'd be great if they do. But I think what the good ones again do is separate the two, is that this person is here to do a job. We are paying them to be here. They are a professional. We can't expect them to do all of this for the love of our organisation. As I said, it'd be great if they do, but I have seen a lot of not-for-profit organisations expect their paid employees to be as passionate and be willing to give up extra time and all these other things because of their passion for the club or the organisation, but the person is there as a professional. And I think you need to respect that and know that they're there to do a paid role, and like I said, if they do a little bit more than that and they're passionate about the club and they give up extra time, great.
Yep.
But it shouldn't be an expectation. And I think that's a slippery slope that you can get into sometimes with paid staff.
And that's such a common trap as well, that people who are in a paid role have been a member, or they're a parent, or there's some connection there.
Yes.
It leads them to take on the role and maybe to give up, just as much of their time in a voluntary capacity doing the job as they are paid for. And it's absolutely not a good system. It's not sustainable, because you need to build that role in a way that, I like the way you put it, that, assume that they're not at all passionate about the organisation and they're just there to do a very good job of that job.
And I felt bad saying that, because it's, yes, ideally they do care. And I suppose that's the difference. Care and passion could be slightly different. Like, they care and they're going to do a good job for you and they're going to look after the organisation, but just don't make the assumption that they're doing it for the love of, because it is a job, and that's what a job is. If you were doing it because you loved it so much and you do it for free, it's no longer a job.
Yeah.
You're essentially volunteering. These people aren't. They are paid staff.
Yeah. Very good advice.
And treat them as so.
Yep. We better leave it at that, Macca. We could probably talk all day on this.
Can I just have one point on that? And I'm quite passionate about it. It is a workplace for these people as well. And I think you need to respect that yes, this is for the majority of people who spend time at your organisation, it's their out of work place to go and have a beer or play sport or compete or do whatever it is that your organisation does. That's not the same for this professional and this person who's paid. So this isn't their getaway time. This isn't their time to relax and be social and have that passion. It's actually the opposite. This is where they go to work and then they'll go and do something else to be social as well. So I think respecting that of your employees is really important. That is a very good point. Yeah. Excellent. And I think a good way to round out the discussion. Thank you, Macca, for joining me today for our podcast discussion on basket case clubs, all about people management. And to all our listeners, if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, head over to our website, cprgroup.com.au, get subscribed. And thank you to Jess, as always, for making us sound wonderful and cutting out all of our tangential stories. And Macca, hopefully it's not going to be as long between drinks, and next time we're talking on the podcast will be less of a gap than last time. Have a Merry Christmas to everyone who's listening. Keep safe and enjoy the holidays if you get one. And if you're in Australia, which I suppose they all will be, in Queensland, enjoy. Not all of them. I tell you what, we got some international listeners, Macca. We got people all over the globe. In the Southern Hemisphere, listeners, enjoy the heat. For the Northern Hemisphere people who are calling in, stay warm. Yeah, stay warm. Yeah. And good call. Yeah, it is. It's our last podcast episode for the year. So happy Christmas and happy New Year, and we look forward to hearing from you all in 2026. 6 years till the Brisbane Olympics. Hard to believe. Only 6 years. All right, everyone. See ya. Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.